This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
Ben Settle, super practical.
I'm not telling people to have a mistress. I'm teaching you, learn the lesson from the people who have a mistress, because there's many business lessons that apply.
Pious.
There's a part in the book of Revelation where Jesus says, I want you either hot or cold. I'm spewing lukewarm churches out. And I think it's a good way to look at your list.
Romantic to his very core.
Once in a while, I'll give my girl a present, like a Snickers bar or something.
And totes tender.
If someone asks you to walk on eggshells, smash the eggshells and let the chips fall wherever they may.
Adored by feminists everywhere.
It takes a strong woman to admit when she's wrong.
Not a judgmental bone in his entire body.
I look at all the free information people give just on Facebook and I go, what a bunch of time hoes.
Has a PhD in armchair philosophy.
In the land of dumbasses, the smartass is king.
You'll never meet a more sensitive guy.
If you really care about people, you shame the hell out of them. This is Ben Settle of the bensettle.com podcast. A podcast that I like to think, Jonathan, that if the late, great Earl Nightingale was still alive and kicking and had not joined the choir invisible, he died way too early. I think he was only like 68 years old when he died or something. Some kind of complication with surgery, if I remember correctly. Guy saw a lot, went through a lot, grew up I guess he grew up in poverty and kind of figured out his way around all that to become one of the greatest success coaches. There's that word again, 3 weeks in a row. Success minds,
coaching
teachers,
month,
grand poobahs, gurus, whatever you want to call them. That most people hopefully, I don't know if most people, but most people should know about him, at least in business, I would think. And I know you had some epiphanies when you got his Lead the Field program, as I did. One of the, it's kind of a weird thing that his company, that his name's on, Nightingale Conant, that their marketing is like, I don't want to say, it's not the best marketing. Let's just say that. And like a lot of their stuff, you can just download free everywhere because they didn't really anticipate that. And so while I think you should buy Earl Nightingale stuff, the reality is it's all over YouTube and everything. But I like to buy stuff just because I'll use it more. And I highly recommend going to nightingaleconant.com and buying
everything. Like a
candy store. Everything Earl Nightingale does. They got some people on there I think teach horse shit, but. And here's the irony. Here, the biggest irony of Nightingale Conant. Now, this is the biggest irony. They are Nightingale Conant because they give a platform to thought leaders and all that for success in business and all that. That's what they did. That's what they've done for many years. But if you go to their site, they're very explicit. At least the last I checked. Maybe this has changed, but you go to their site, they're very explicit about how they're not taking any new submissions on for new products. Which, if you listen to Earl Nightingale, that's like the anti-Earl Nightingale attitude,
right?
His attitude, like the idea of like closing off new ideas is like that would horrify him.
Death.
He spins in his spins in his grave, Jonathan, about that. My opinion. But and here's more irony, if you want, since we're on the subject. When I graduated college in 1998, the first job I was supposed to get. First real job, I should say. I was supposed to actually work for Kevin Trudeau, who's in prison as of now. He was the infomercial king back then. He did really good infomercials back then, actually. This is before he went dark side and all that. Although he had been in jail before that, but at least the ones he was doing at that time, like for Mega Memory and Mega Math and all that, they were actually really good programs. And that was back in the, I was supposed to get a job with his infomercial company. I was going to be the assistant of the guy who directs his infomercials, which would have been a pretty cool job, actually, in hindsight. It ended up falling through because he ended up making some bad business decision or something. They called me, we can't hire you anyway. So anyway, whatever, that's fine. Maybe that was for the best. But here's the reason I bring it up. His office was in the same building as Nightingale Conant in the late 90s. And I remember going there for 2 or 3 different job interviews, and the parking lot was packed with cars because there were just so many people working there because there was so much stuff being sold through Nightingale Conant at that time, with just their call center and all that. I have a friend who still lives out that way, and he tells me their parking lot is pretty much empty now when he drives by there. So that tells you something. Interesting. It is very interesting and sad because the state, this is Earl Nightingale's legacy, basically, that company. And if this is all true, and by the way, I haven't been there myself. I haven't seen it. I could be completely wrong. And if that's the case, My apologies to them. But if it's the case that it has dropped like that, someone needs to tap into their inner Earl Nightingale and take care of business here, because that guy did too much good for this to be the case. So back to what he taught. Now, there's a lot of stuff he taught, but I kind of narrowed it down to some things that are very relevant or have been very relevant to direct marketing for yours unruly here. And I bet, Jonathan, they've been very relevant to you since you're an astute student of his Lead the Field program, which I think everybody should listen to. In fact, I wish I'd listened to it when I was in high school. And I wish or at least certainly in college or something. It would have, it changes everything. Even over a decade into business, I don't care how long you've been in business, it'll still give you a different mindset. And not some like woo-woo nonsensical coaching thing, but like practical.
Bro, I play Nightingale for my son on the way to school. He's like, what is this? And I'm like, just listen, I'm programming you, kid.
Yeah, well, see, now you're bringing him up right. You're bringing up the next generation of Utes in the right way. Earl Nightingale is kind of like the uncle who teaches success secrets to the nephews and nieces. I had an uncle that did that for me, but it didn't stick the way Earl Nightingale would have. I still made lots of mistakes. Be that as it may, one of the best and this one you can get on YouTube. In fact, I don't know where else you can get this. You can just go to YouTube, Earl Nightingale, type in The Boss. They may sell it somewhere on Nightingale Conan. If they do, you should buy it. It's called The Boss, and it's like 12 minutes long. And I've listened to it over and over and over recently, just, I don't know, several times, just whenever I have 15 minutes and I just want to fill it with something, I just listen to The Boss. And the whole point of that recording is the boss is not necessarily your actual quote boss or whoever runs your company. If you have a job, it's not your client. If you're a copywriter or a coach or a consultant, or you have something where you do have client work, it's not your client, it's not your customer, or it's not your boss. Your boss is the customer. It's the customer. It's whoever consumes the product and service or whatever, and beyond that. So it's not, for example, if you're a freelance copywriter, the client is not your boss, it's the market. It's the people your client is selling the product to. That's your real boss. You want to serve that market. And Eugene Schwartz used to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Because you have no client but the market. And so it is. This is just how it is. If you're a coach, and if you're listening to this and you're defying me about coaches, realize that the person that's hiring you is not necessarily your boss. Like your boss is probably whoever they're serving. So it's whoever the market is that you're trying to help. That's the boss. And the thing I took away from this, though, this is the best. It's the very end. The very end is the best part of the entire thing. And if you do nothing but listen to the last couple minutes of The Boss, I think you will have the same epiphany I did when he talked about if you just serve the customer, whatever situation, you serve the customer and you do it and you do right by them and you do it right and all the things right, you realize that they don't come back to see your business or your company. They're buying because of you. It's not your product. It's you. They're not buying. Jonathan, I just had this. I had this guy email me yesterday. He unfortunately he was in the biz op niche, which right there he's got some strikes against him, for everything. But he said he got in it because that's how he got into this, and he understands the niche. And okay, that's fine, fair enough. He understands that market, no problem. But apparently he was selling something that wasn't his to sell. So it was like, I don't know if it was MLM or something where he doesn't control the product. And so he's like, the government shut this company down. This is what I was selling. What do I do? He goes, he was like in a panic, right? And I was like, he goes, I have no income coming in now. They just shut it down. And I said, well, do you have an email list? If you have an email list, then you just simply find something else to sell them. Like it's because they weren't buying that product. They were buying him. They trusted him. And, this may seem like the most obvious thing in the world to people, but it's true. They're not buying your thing. They're buying you. They're not buying your whiz-bang product. They're buying you first. It's like the great Doug Dana when I interviewed him for my copywriting grab bag product. And he goes, I'm going to go shopping for a car today. He goes, but I'm not shopping for a car. I'm shopping for a salesman first. And he was right. And nobody really thinks that, right? But that is ultimately what we do when we go buy a car. We're actually looking for someone to actually show us some stuff and not like screw us over and all that. And that's the way to look at it. They're not buying your car. They're buying you first. And, they're buying someone to help them So think about that, whatever business you're in. I had this discussion recently. Let's say at the time of this recording, I'm having 2 merchant accounts. I'm trying to get 2 more. Ultimately, I want 5 at least. I'm finding this to be a huge pain in the ass, by the way.
Yeah, I
Jonathan.
bet.
I don't know what's going on, but I have like a merchant account curse lately, and that's a whole other podcast in and of itself. But my point is, let's say that they all just shut me down, even PayPal, right? We're shutting Ben down. Okay, I still have my list though. I can still sell them other stuff. Either I take check and bank transfer as payment, which I'd like to actually sell something that does that, or something on ClickBank or something like that. There's always the reason that they're buying me, they're not actually buying the product. And so I wouldn't let the merchant account like stop me. I mean, it'd be a big pain in the ass if that happened, but the reality is that a lot of people panic, but if you have an email list that you've been taking care of and everything, and they like you, know you, and trust you, and they're looking for you for guidance. They want you to help them find something that's going to solve their problem. So that's in the boss. They're not coming to see your company. They're coming to see you. They're not buying your product. They're buying you first and foremost. Another thing that the great Earl Nightingale taught, and he said this kind of like an offhand comment in his Strangest Secret recording, men simply don't think. And I think we could say that about women too. So let's not, any women listening to this, don't think you're off the hook here. Okay, you're just as guilty as guys with this. Nobody's thinking, which gives the rest of us who do think a huge advantage. Wouldn't you say, Jonathan, that, you probably run into people in business all the time who just don't think. They can't think beyond a swipe file if they're a copywriter. They can't think beyond like stealing what other people do. They can't give credit where credit's due because they're like a scarcity mindset. Do you know how many people, Jonathan, when I did those Mount Rushmore podcasts,
Yeah.
how many people said, God, man, I can't, like, you actually just like, you weren't afraid of like losing business by promoting them?
Really?
Hell no. I want everyone to buy their stuff. Why wouldn't I? It's like I don't like people who buy my stuff. I want them to buy their stuff and vice versa. Like nobody just buys from one person if you're doing it right. People want it just doesn't make any sense, but they're not thinking beyond that. And so just think. If you become a problem solver and not a swiper, and this is going to be an upcoming email player's rule, by the way, Jonathan, a little foreknowledge here of what I'm going to teach. A lot of copywriters are not copywriters; they're just writers that copy. And when you realize that most copywriters are just copying something else, most coaches are just regurgitating some nonsense they've never applied to their own business. Most of what you hear out there is just people not thinking, and you realize you're one of the few people who does think. You're just automatically standing out in a crowd. So that's another thing he taught. Attitude is a big one. In fact, the very first part of Lead the Field is the magic word, and that's attitude. And it just changes everything when you realize your own attitudes are the things that hold you back. If you think there's a boogeyman around every corner, then you're probably going to behave in such a way where you're going to be victimized by something. If you look at things as opportunities, and I know sometimes things suck. I'm not like totally Pollyannish about this, but the reality is your attitude and how you deal with stuff is going to make a big deal. And he breaks it as far as saying that your surroundings are a reflection of your attitude.
Yeah, the neighborhood and all that. The imagery that he paints is beautiful.
I would say that I think it's true, but I think there are exceptions where people really do get into like situations like for example, you get people who are like falsely accused of something, and they go to prison for 30 years, and they weren't even like in the city it happened in or something.
Well,
I don't know how good of an attitude is going to help you in that situation, but you're better off having a better lawyer. But still, attitude's important. Acres of Diamonds is something. Now he didn't invent Acres of Diamonds. He got it from a book by Russell Cromwell, whatever this guy's name is. And it's about how everyone has these like assets that we don't even know, that we don't think about all the time, and how we're not using them. He told the story of Acres of Diamonds of the farmer in Africa who sold everything because there was like diamonds being discovered in Africa. So he sold his farm to go look for diamonds, ended up not finding any diamonds, and ended up throwing himself into a river and committing suicide. He got so depressed by it. Yet the guy who bought his farm accidentally found a whole bunch of diamonds on the property he just bought from him. Diamonds were there the whole time. He just didn't recognize it. One of my favorite examples is email player subscriber Stephanie Royal. I was helping her out with some stuff with her, what she teaches, like personality typing and how to use it for marketing and copywriting. And she was telling me on an offhand thing, I go, well, tell me some like practical ways you've used this. She goes, well, one time I talked someone off of killing themselves off a ledge using this stuff. I go, really? She goes, oh yeah. She was working for a personal injury lawyer at the time. And she used her knowledge of how introverts and extroverts and feelers and thinkers and knowing the difference between the two. And she was able to identify this guy as like someone who's more of a feeler than a thinker. He processes everything through his feelings first. And she understood that, recognized it, and literally talked him out of like suicide. This guy really wanted to talk suicide. And I said, wait a minute, you got to use that in like your emails and on your sales letter. I'm like, that's a hell of a story. And she's like, yeah, you're right. And it never even occurred to her that she had this really powerful proof element and story that she could use in all of her marketing until someone pointed out.
Until you coached her.
In this case, me and Coach El Bembo here was able to help with that. Another thing Earl Nightingale teaches, or taught, I should say, which is really powerful, is the power of being a specialist versus a generalist. And I love the example he says, like talking about like a ship out at sea or whatever. When a ship gets in trouble, that jettisons everything except the people that are vital to the ship's the things that are vital, not the people.
Yeah.
Jettison people off the ship. But let's say the ship is sinking or something. They're going to get rid of all the crates and all the weight that doesn't need to be there, right? And only the most vital things that they have to have are there. And then when they get the ship fixed and on course and all that, then they will rehire on a new crew, more people, bring on the crates, whatever they were doing. And he says businesses are the same way. Think about, like, he grew up like in the Depression. We saw it at its worst. And he's like, if you're a company, who are you most likely to fire first, the generalist or the specialist? I mean, the generalist you can safely get rid of until you've weathered this storm, and then you'll hire them back on. But the specialist who's vital, who's necessary to something happening, has the ultimate job security. It's the same thing in business. That's why I think people should get away from all this generalist stuff and try to keep being more of a specialist. Very powerful stuff. And then finally, and again, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but talking about the Depression, he was talking about, in one of his stories, he talked about how there was signs in businesses during the Great Depression. No, we don't need work. Because everybody's looking for a job, right? Not hiring. And so he talked about one guy, though, who he identified some companies he really wanted to work at. He studied them. He studied what they needed. And in this case, back then, it was like sales, right? Like how to make more sales in an efficient way. And instead of saying, can I have a job? He went in there and showed them how he could get them the thing they wanted the most, which was whatever it was, more sales or whatever. And he got hired. And it's the most obvious thing in the world, right? But this is how it works. It's kind of like these guys and gals who go around and they're trying to get people to be affiliates for their product. Now, I don't know about you, Jonathan, but I get people pitching me a lot to sell their product. I don't do a lot of it for other people. I pick who I get to sell, but they don't know that. So they come to me and they think that they're pitching me on the greatest opportunity ever. But it's like they do nothing. They don't even like bother to ask, does my list even want this thing? They don't even bother asking the most simple question, because in most cases it's no. Or they don't understand that I already have a product like they want me to sell. And I'm looking for things that will actually complement the other products I sell. And that's how I pick the products. It's kind of like, like if you go to Walmart, let's say you invent a product that you want to go into Walmart, sell in Walmart and other big retailers. The buyers at Walmart, they don't really care so much about the product. What they're looking at is, will your product help sell the products around it? So they put your product on the shelf. Is it going to help sell the ones immediately around it? If the answer is yes to that, they're probably going to put your product in there, or they're at least going to be very interested in it. If not, no matter how great it is or how low of a price you can offer, they're not. And a lot of people never bother thinking about it from Walmart's point of view. They just think about it from their own point of view. And it's the same thing with like affiliate marketing or anything else. You got to find out what people want, or you're not going to be able to persuade them or influence them to do whatever you want them to do. So those are some things I learned from the great Earl Nightingale, Jonathan. There's probably many, many more. And who knows, maybe in a future podcast, we'll talk more about that. In the meantime, next week, I'm going to talk about the number one way, or certainly one of the number one ways to be successful that nobody wants to do, and that people will fight me on, or they'll be too scared to do it. But if you do it, I can almost guarantee you will see success beyond your wildest dreams of avarice, and all will be well in your world. So that'll be next week.
All right, that's a wrap for another bensettle.com podcast. See you guys next week.
You've been listening to the bensettle.com podcast. To download yourself a free issue of Ben's prestigious $97 per month email players newsletter, which is going to show you 24 ways to write emails people eagerly read, click, and buy from, head on over to www.bensettle.com. Off you go. You know it makes sense.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.